Hello. So I hope the volume is okay. It's the early hours of the morning. I'm just alone with my thoughts. One thing I want to discuss is anti-Americanism online. I'm specifically thinking of Facebook, but this also applies to YouTube and many other big sites which are based in California, which for now at least is an American state. I know there is talk of secession and so on. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. But anyway, my point is that some of the world's biggest websites are American based. Now, what I notice online is that there are certain forums and quite a large number of people. I don't want to get into hyperbole, but quite a large number of people who are very, very vocal in their anti American views. Now, what I find is sometimes people allow their dislike of a particular government to then translate into a dislike of an entire country. And this is a trap that people can easily fall into. And it's a trap that we all have to be careful of, all of us. Whichever country you're in, I think it is very, very important to differentiate between a country and a government. Because in most countries, there is a complex history. Anyway, what I notice is that there are a lot of people who are very, very vocal in their anti American views. And it's usually because of US foreign policy. Now, this is my honest opinion. I myself, and my honest experience, I myself have been very vocal of Washington's foreign policy. I was very vocal of the Bush administration. I was one of many people around the world that opposed the invasion of Iraq. I still believe that was a massive mistake. And our Prime Minister, our former Prime Minister, his name is virtually mud now. Now, that's for another video. Um, Tony Blair, of course, I'm talking about. So I've been there. I've felt anger at American foreign policy. I have had the feeling that America is far too fond of foreign wars, and America can come across as an overbearing bully and a warmonger, right? I've been there, I've had those sentiments. But as I've got a bit older, I've developed the sense that actually America is not a simple country. Yes, it's a very powerful country. It is really the only superpower around. Second place either falls to Russia or China, depending on your definition. Probably China. Um, but what I notice is these people who criticize the American government, which, by the way, is totally legitimate and includes many Americans themselves, and incidentally, it isn't necessarily a specific administration. I'm not talking about people criticizing Obama or criticizing Trump or criticizing Bush. I'm talking about people criticizing America generally. What I do find interesting is they are using Facebook to do this or YouTube. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying that if you use an American company, you can't criticize the American government. Of course not. That would be utterly absurd. Because in that case, many people use computers that are probably made in China. Hence, that wouldn't follow. You can't therefore criticize communism. It doesn't work that way. So I'm not for a second suggesting that if you use Facebook, you can't criticize the American government. Because the American government isn't the same as an American company, obviously. But the problem I have is these people sometimes allow their contempt for the US to get into a generic contempt for the US. I've seen some utterly ridiculous memes. I'll give an example. I've just seen one before I made this video, and it showed the attack in Orlando, the attack in Paris, i.e., high profile terrorist attacks in the West. And the heading of this meme was like, Americans be like, and then it showed the picture terrorism, terrorism. And then it came to 83 killed in Syria. Americans don't care. Now, what that is basically saying is A, Americans don't care about the situation in Syria. Absurd. It is absurd because you cannot generalize 320 million people. Of course, there are Americans that care about the situation in Syria. But it also implies, well, it gets into this worldview that it's all the fault of America, which is nonsense. Anyone who's actually looked at this situation knows that is total nonsense. Russia, for example, has enormous culpability. So does the Assad regime. Um, but this demonization of the American people, that's what it actually gets into, because it's implying that Americans only care if something impacts Western people. And this isn't something attacking the French or the British or the Germans or the Canadians. It's specifically targeted at Americans. And I think this is absurd because America is one of the most pluralistic, diverse, and in many ways tolerant countries on earth. It's a fact. America is a country built by immigrants. And no matter how much you point out all the faults in American history, of which there are many, no question about that, the fact remains this is a country where thousands of people from around the world who have sought a better life have settled in, who have escaped persecution. New York City has 800 languages. The point I am making is you cannot say that you hate America on one hand whilst using an American company to do it. Because that isn't, oh, I disagree with the American government or even I hate the American government. It's, I hate America. And sometimes this does get into demonization of the American people. Now, I'm well aware, actually, the irony of this is some of the most vocal critics of the American government as a body in general are American people. America is a country with many flaws. There's many things I don't like about the world's biggest superpower. I don't like the gun issue. I don't like sometimes the religious fanaticism of the hard Christian right. And I'm not talking about the Christian right generally. I just mean, the extreme side of it. I don't like the political correctness in America, which can be very prominent sometimes. There's a lot of things I don't like in the US, but there are many things I frankly love about the US, and I do believe it is a great country. So, all I'm saying is people need to differentiate between a government and a country. And I think sometimes there are people who are happy to use Facebook. Incidentally, by the way, a lot of these people are coming from countries where Facebook is banned. Now, it cannot escape my notice that there is a bit of irony in this. You're using a website that is banned in your own country to denounce a country which places freedom of expression very highly. In fact, to the extent that incredibly contentious views are protected. And I believe that is true of Western countries in general. Is there racism in Western countries? Yeah. Is there nationalism? Yeah. But I still believe that when we look at the some of the situation that applies when we see this sort of anti-American or anti-Western rhetoric, it definitely lies in double standards. I mean, the sort of things that Chinese nationals, for example, say about Western countries in Western countries, no way would that be tolerated from a Westerner in China. No way. So I see certain people from single party regimes like China coming to study in Europe or in North America. And then what do? They become mouthpieces for the Communist Party. And I'm not talking about everyone. I'm really, really not. I know many Chinese people. I have a great fondness for the Chinese people, but I don't have much respect for aggressive nationalists. From any persuasion, I have no time for aggressive American nationals either. All I'm saying is you have to be very wary of double standards. And if you are taking advantage of the free expression in a Western country and you're using that just to bash that country, what I would suggest is look at your own backyard. Look at the lack of freedom of expression in whichever totalitarian country you come from. And frankly, it pisses me right off. I do feel sometimes the emphasis on free expression could sometimes be used almost against us. And by us, Maybe I shouldn't talk in those terms because I can't claim to represent Western civilization. But I just, these are just things that I observe, and yeah, it pisses me off. So, nothing wrong with criticizing the US government, but be very careful that you don't then get into demonization of the American people as a whole. You cannot generalize 320 million people any more than you can generalize 1.4 billion Chinese people or 10 million Belgian people. You can't generalize any country. You know, even North Korea has open minded people who are not subservient slaves of the regime who have been outside and they know the outside world. And, you know, I really hate that sort of inward looking nationalism. I can honestly say I don't hate any country. There are governments I've got contempt for, but I believe every country has potential. I really do. Certainly, in some cases, it's going to take a very, very long time. But I do believe that fundamentally, there are certain values that are universal. Values like the desire for self liberty, the desire for self expression. I don't believe that's some sort of Western concept. Yes, it is true that there's, for example, Confucian principles in China, and there's a concept of society versus the individual, and there are different understandings of that between East and West. But fundamentally, I think there is not that big a difference between human beings, regardless of culture. Every human being has anger. Every human being has love. Every human being has the potential for those things. So the point I am making is I get that it is easy to bash the world's biggest superpower. You know, America is a convenient bogeyman to put in the pillory, but simply bashing America will not solve the world's problems. Why? Because A, America is not responsible for all the world's problems. To suggest that one country, no matter how powerful that country may be, is responsible for all the world's problems is nonsense. No individual country is so powerful that it can cause all the problems in the world. And America is a very powerful country, but it is not absolutely powerful. And actually, in numerous league tables, the United States lags quite well behind in many other countries in certain um, looking at certain things. So yeah, I'll just round this up. I just want to say, when you're using an American company, just remember, not everything about America is bad. Okay, so bash the American government, but just remember that it's also a country that is enabling you to use a website where you can play games, where you can share stupid memes, whether they're honest or not, and where you can find empathy with people who share your worldviews. And that simply isn't the case in every country. It's just not. And this shouldn't be construed as some sort of apologia for American wrongs. Not at all. All I'm saying is I understand where these people are coming from because I used to be that way. I was never hard left, but certainly when I was much younger, I was, yeah, I would say pretty naive. And I did look at the world in a certain way. So that's all I'm going to say. Let me know your thoughts. And again, you know, some of the strongest critics of the United States are Americans. And I just feel it's unfortunate that you get this national sentiment from certain other countries where there is not the same sort of value of free expression, unless, of course, it is in nationalism. The only reason I'm mentioning China is because A, it is a powerful country itself, and B, because I'm very familiar with that situation. I'm sure there's other examples. Certainly, there's many examples in the Middle East. I have heard it said, though, that there have been examples of people at rallies. I've read several biographies of leading British journalists. They have testified that they have seen rallies in parts of the world where people are burning American flags whilst having t shirts saying, I love New York. Credible. Everyone has to be self conscious of Am I displaying double standards in my actions? So, for example, looking at myself, I have contempt for the Chinese Communist Party and some of the things they do, but I could never say I hate China, I hate all things Chinese, because it would not be true. Plus, I know full well that there'll be components of my computer that are made in China. So the world is interconnected. That's the point I'm making. And we all need each other. And it's fine to show dissent, it's fine to voice these things, but just don't make sweeping statements about any country. That's all I'm going to say. Okay, let me know your thoughts.